Students, let's start Indian polity. Now, the first chapter is historical background. So, we'll read and understand. So, the first thing is the British came to India in 1600 as traders in the form of East India Company, which had the exclusive right of trading in India under a charter granted by Queen Elizabeth I. British came in 1600 as a traders by a charter granted by Queen Elizabeth I. Charter means a document form. And now in 1765, the company, which till now had purely trading functions, obtained the Diwani status. Diwani means the rights over revenue and civil justice of Bengal, Bihar and Orissa. So, the East India Company obtained Diwani status in 1765. Diwani status means the rights over revenue and civil justice. So, in which areas it obtained the Diwani status? It obtained in Bengal, Bihar and Orissa, BBO. Okay, this started its career as a territorial power. In 1858, in the wake of Sepoy Mutiny, the British Crown assumed direct responsibility over the governance of India. This rule continued until India was granted independence on August 15, 1947. Okay, first in 1600 they came as traders. In 1765 they obtained Diwani status, that is control over Bengal, Bihar and Orissa. And in 1858 they assumed the British Crown in India. They took direct responsibility and that continued till 1947 August 15th. Now next is, with independence came the need for a constitution. Hence a constituent assembly was formed for this purpose in 1946, and on January 26, 1950 the constitution came into being. However, various features of the Indian constitution and polity had their roots in the British rule. There were certain events in the British rule that laid down the legal framework for organization and functioning of government and administration in British India. These events have greatly influenced our constitution and polity. They are explained here in chronological order under two major headings. One is Company Rule, that is from 1773 to 1858, and the other is Crown Rule, 1858 to 1947. So the first is Company Rule, 1773 to 1858. So first act is the Regulating Act of 1773. This act was of great constitutional importance as it was the first step taken by the British government to control and regulate the affairs of East India Company in India. And next, it recognized for the first time the political and administrative functions of the company. Third is, it laid the foundations of central administration in India. So this act is of great importance. Why? Because it was the first step taken by British government to control and regulate the affairs of East India Company. Before, East India Company would control India, but after Regulating Act of 1773, British government took control over East India Company. Is that clear? So it was the first step taken by British government to control and regulate the affairs of East India Company in India. And next, it recognized for the first time the political and administrative functions of the company. Third, it laid foundations of central administration in India. Okay, now let's get into the features. The features of this act were as follows. It designated the Governor of Bengal as the Governor General of Bengal and created an executive council of 4 members to assist him. The first such Governor General was Lord Warren Hastings. Okay, before we would have Governor of Bengal, Governor of Bihar, Governor of Odisha. So after this act, there were that is, the governor of Bengal was converted as Governor General of Bengal, and he got executive council which consists of 4 members to assist him. So the first Governor General was Lord Warren Hastings. Now next is, it made the governors of Bombay and Madras presidencies subordinate to the Governor General of Bengal, unlike earlier when the presidencies were independent of one another. So before, we would have Governor of Bombay, Governor of Madras and Governor of Bengal as the independent bodies. But after the passage of Regulating Act, the Governor of Bombay and Governor of Madras became subordinates to Governor General of Bengal. Is that clear, guys? Okay, the first point is, the Governor of Bengal became Governor General of Bengal, and he have the executive council of 4 members to assist him. So the first Governor General of Bengal was Lord Warren Hastings, and next, Governor of Bombay and Governor of Madras became subordinates of Governor of Bengal. Next, it provided for the establishment of the Supreme Court at Calcutta 1774, comprising 1 Chief Justice and 3 other judges. So Supreme Court was established in 1774 with 1 Chief Justice and 3 other judges. And next, it prohibited the servants of the company from engaging in any private trade or accepting presents or bribes from the natives. Now, why do you think this became the feature? Because before Regulating Act, there was a huge corruption in East India Company. So even the servants were engaged in other private trades. They would do lot of corruption. So for that, to counter that thing, this Regulating Act prohibited the servants of the company from engaging in any private trade or accepting presents or bribes from the natives. Next, it strengthened the control of the British government over the company by requiring the Court of Directors, governing body of the company, to report on its revenue, civil and military affairs. So Court of Directors was formed to strengthen the control of British government over East India Company. Okay, so Court of Directors, that is COD, was formed to report on its revenue, civil and military affairs. So these are the 5 features. We'll revise once again. Governor of Bengal became Governor General of Bengal, and the first such Governor General was Lord Warren Hastings. He would have 1 executive council which consists of 4 members to assist him, and the Governor General of Bengal have 2 subordinates. One is Governor of Bombay and the other is Governor of Madras. But before, the 3 presidencies, that is the Governor of Bombay, Governor of Bengal and Governor of Madras, were independent of each other. But after the passage of this act, Governor of Bombay and Madras presidencies became subordinate to Governor General of Bengal. And next, it provided for the establishment. Supreme Court was established in 1774 at Calcutta with 1 Chief Justice and 3 other judges. And next, servants of the company should not engage in private trade and corruption. Next, Court of Directors was established to strengthen British government control over East India Company. So Court of Directors was asked to report on its revenue, civil and military affairs in India. These are the features of Regulating Act. I hope this is clear for you. And now the next act is Amending Act of 1781. So in a bid to rectify the defects of the Regulating Act of 1773, the British Parliament passed the Amending Act of 1781, also known as Act of Settlement. So even though they kept Regulating Act of 1773 to to stop the corruption which was occurring in the previously with East India Company, even after passage of Regulating Act, the corruption was not controlled. So the Amending Act of 1781 was again brought to rectify the defects of Regulating Act. So this amending act of 1781 is also known as Act of Settlement. So now the features of this act are: first is it exempted the Governor General and the Council from the jurisdiction of the Supreme Court for the acts done by them in their official capacity. Similarly, it also exempted the servants of the company from the jurisdiction of the Supreme Court for their official actions. So anybody can't approach the Supreme Court with the official actions taken by the Governor General and his councils, and also the other servants of the company. So next, so the Governor General, Council and the servants of the company, whatever they do, whatever the actions they do officially are not justifiable under the Supreme Court. And that is one of the first feature of this amending act, also known as Act of Settlement. Now the next feature is it excluded the revenue matters and the matters arising in the collection of revenue from the jurisdiction of Supreme Court. So even the revenue matters also were exempted. And next, it provided that the Supreme Court was to have jurisdiction over all the inhabitants of Calcutta. It also required the court to administer the personal law of the defendants, that is, Hindus were to be tried according to the Hindu law and the Muslims were to be tried according to the Mohammedan law. Okay, so two separate laws for Hindu and for Muslims were provided by the Supreme Court. And fourth is it laid down that the appeals from the provincial courts could be taken to the Governor General and Council and not to the Supreme Court. Okay, so the appeals which are done in provincial courts can be taken to Governor General but not to the Supreme Court. And next, it empowered the Governor General and Council to frame regulations for provincial courts and councils. So Governor General have to frame regulations for provincial courts and councils, and the appeals from provincial courts should be taken to Governor General, not to the Supreme Court. And next, Pitt's India Act of 1784. The next important act was Pitt's India Act of 1784. We'll also let's take a short review about this amending act. Amending act is also called Act of Settlement. The features are: the Governor General, Council and the company servants were exempted from Supreme Court jurisdiction. And next, the revenue matters are also exempted. Next, the Supreme Court treats separately for Hindus and for Muslims. For Hindus as per their Hindu law and for Muslims as per their Mohammedan law. And next, the appeals from provincial courts are taken to Governor General directly, not to Supreme Court, Governor General and Council. So next, it empowered Governor General to frame regulations for provincial courts and councils. So the features of the Pitt's India Act are: it distinguished between the commercial and political functions of the company. This is one of the important line where frequently questions are asked in so many government question papers. So first is it distinguished between commercial and political functions of the company. Next, it allowed the Court of Directors to manage the commercial affairs but created a new body called Board of Control to manage the political affairs. Now, where did you hear this word Court of Directors? It was framed in Regulating Act 1773 to report on its revenue, military affairs. So, Court of Directors was framed in Regulating Act, and now one new body called Board of Control was created, and thus it established a double government. See, double government is different from diarchy, okay? So here in Pitt's India Act, double government was started. Double government means it created separate body for commercial and political functions. For commercial functions, court of directors was formed, and for political affairs, board of control, that is the new body, was created in Pitt's India Act. Okay, court of directors was created in Regulating Act, and board of control was created in Pitt's India Act. So both different bodies are framed to control, one court of directors to control commercial affairs, board of control to control political affairs. So double government system was formed. Okay, now third is, it empowered the board of control to supervise and direct all operations of the civil, military, government or revenues of the British possessions of India. But before, in Regulating Act, court of directors used to report on this civil, military and revenue affairs. But now board of control was created to manage the political affairs, that is the civil, military or revenue affairs. Whereas court of directors, as this is old one, so it was given in charge to manage commercial affairs. Okay, remember like that. And now, thus, the act was significant for two reasons. First, the company territories in India were for the first time called British possessions in India. And the second, British government was given supreme control over company affairs and its administration in India. Okay, as double government system was formed, one for commercial affairs and the other for political affairs, and it empowered board of control. So overallly, it created, for the first time, it was called British possessions in India, and second, the British government was given supreme control over company affairs. Okay, in Regulating Act, British government laid central foundation, but now the company's territories were called British possessions in India. Is it clear, guys? This is about the Pitt's India Act. And next is Act of 1786. In 1786, Lord Cornwallis was appointed as a Governor General of Bengal. He placed two demands to accept that post. First, he should be given power to override the decisions of his council in special cases. Second, he would also be the commander-in-chief. Accordingly, the Act of 1786 was enacted to make both the provisions. This is simple. Again, I'll tell you. In 1786, Lord Cornwallis was appointed as a Governor General of Bengal. He placed two demands. One is to give overriding powers for decision in special cases to his council, and second, he should be commander-in-chief. These both provisions were added, so that is called Act of 1786. That's it. And next, Charter Act of 1793. The features of this act were as follows. First, it extended the overriding power given to Lord Cornwallis over his council to all future Governor Generals and Governors of Presidencies. Okay, Lord Cornwallis was given overriding powers of his council and also to all future Governor Generals and Governors of Presidencies. And next, it gave the Governor General more powers and control over the governments of the subordinate presidencies of Bombay and Madras. Okay, next. Third is, it extended the trade monopoly of the company in India for another period of 20 years. Trade monopoly was extended for 20 more years. And next, it provided that the Commander-in-Chief was not to be a member of Governor General's Council unless he was so appointed. Fifth, it laid down that the members of the Board of Control and their staff were henceforth to be paid out of Indian revenues. So all the salaries for them, that is for the members of Board of Control and the other staff, should be paid from Indian revenues. So these are the features of the Charter Act of 1793. Remember, Charter Act started in 1793 and it will carry on till 1853. Okay, we have series of charter acts and it will be implemented every 20 years. So here 1793 is there, so add plus 20, that is 1813. We'll get another charter act in 1813. Okay, now yes, 1813 it came, charter act of 1813. Again, if you add 20 years here, 1833 another charter act will be there, and if you add another 20 years for 1833, 1853 we have the last series of charter act. Is that clear, guys? So 18, remember like that. So charter act 1813, the features of this act were as follows. It abolished the trade monopoly of the company in India, that is, the Indian trade was thrown open to all British merchants. However, it continued the monopoly of the company over trade in tea and trade with China. This came as one of the question in UPSC previous papers. So I'll repeat this once again. It abolished the trade monopoly of the company in India, that is, the Indian trade was thrown open to all British merchants. However, it continued the monopoly of the company over the trade in tea and trade with China. And next, it asserted the sovereignty of the British Crown over the company's territories in India. Third is, it allowed the Christian missionaries to come to India for the purpose of enlightening the people. Next, it provided for the spread of Western education among the inhabitants of the British territories in India. It authorized the local governments in India to impose taxes on persons. They could also punish the persons for not paying taxes. So harsh steps were taken against India. So first, trade monopoly was thrown open to all British merchants. It continued its trade in tea with China, and next, it asserted sovereignty of British Crown over company territories in India. Christian missionaries were allowed, and spread of Western education started, and local governments were imposed to pay taxes on persons. So persons have to pay taxes. If they didn't pay, they used to get punishment. So next, Charter Act of 1833. This act was the final step towards centralization in British India. What is the first step taken for centralization? In which act first step was taken towards centralization? It is Regulating Act 1773. What is the speciality of Pitt's India Act? Double government system was formed. One is political and the other is commercial. Okay, for commercial, Court of Directors, and for political, it is Board of Control. Okay, now Charter Act 1833 was the final step towards centralization in British India. And now the features of this act were: first, it made the Governor General of Bengal as the Governor General of India and vested in him all civil and military powers. Thus, the act created for the first time Government of India having the authority over the entire territorial area possessed by the British in India. Lord William Bentinck was the first Governor General of India. Now, who is the first Governor General of Bengal? Lord Warren Hastings. See, remember, I'll tell you one trick. William Bentinck, that is WB, will come last. Warren Hastings is WH. Okay, WH, Warren Hastings, WB, William Bentinck. Okay, H will come first and B will come later on. H is Governor General of Bengal, that is Warren Hastings. B is Governor General of India, that is William Bentinck. Okay, in alphabetical order, generally B will come first, but here B will come last. Okay, first we'll get Governor General of Bengal. So for that, Warren Hastings will be there, and next we'll get, that is in Charter Act 1833, we will get Governor General of India. So William Bentinck will come here. Remember like that. Okay, just for remembering, many of them will get confused between these two. So one trick to remember is this one. And next, it deprived the Governor of Bombay and Madras of their legislative powers. Okay, first in regulating act, they became as subordinates to Governor General of India, so Governor General of Bengal, and now in Charter Act 1833, they even deprived their legislative powers also. Okay, and next, the Governor General of India was given exclusive legislative powers for the entire British India. The laws made under the previous acts were called regulations, while the laws made under this act were called as acts. Okay. Now, before in regulating act, Governor of Bengal and Governor of Bombay and Governor of Madras were became subordinates to Governor General of Bengal. And now, when Governor General of India came, he took away the legislative powers of Governor of Bombay and Madras. Now he became as exclusive legislative powers. He became the body of exclusive legislative powers. Okay, by taking away the legislative powers from the subordinates also. Who are subordinates? That is Governor of Bombay and Governor of Madras. Okay, now again is the laws made under previous acts were called regulations, but from now whatever the laws they will make, it will be called as acts. Okay, now the third is it ended the activities of the East India Company as a commercial body which became a purely administrative body. It provided that the company's territories in India were held by it in trust for His Majesty, his heirs, and his successors. Next, the Charter Act of 1833 attempted to introduce the system of open competition for the selection of civil servants and stated that Indians should not be debarred from holding any place, office, and employment under the company. However, this provision was negated after opposition from the Court of Directors. So they thought to introduce open competition system, but Court of Directors rejected it. And in Pitt's India Act, what is the work done by Court of Directors? It used to see commercial affairs. Okay, so it became purely political body. So entire activities of the East India Company were abolished, were ended, and it became purely administrative body. So this is about the Charter Act 1833. This is one of the most important act. And next, Charter Act 1853. This was the last of the series of Charter Acts passed by British Parliament between 1793 and 1853. Now we will see, in 1793 we will have Charter Act 1. In Charter Act 2, add 20 years for this. That is, in 1813 we will have the second one. And I had again 20 years. In 1833 we will have third Charter Act. Again add 20 years. In 1853 we will get the fourth Charter Act. And this is the last of the series. Okay. Now this was a significant constitutional landmark. Now let us learn about these features. First, it separated for the first time the legislative and executive functions of the Governor General's Council. It provided for addition of 6 new members called legislative councillors to the council. And next, in other words, it established a separate Governor General's Legislative Council, which came to be known as Indian Legislative Council. This legislative wing of the council functioned as a mini parliament, adopting the same procedures as a British parliament. Thus, legislation for the first time was treated as a special function of the government, requiring special machinery and special processes. Now what this means is the Governor General's Council extended to 6 members. Okay. First, it used to have 4 members as the executive members, council members in Regulating Act. And next in this Charter Act 1853, 6 new members were added. And total we have 6 new members were added, and these members are called legislative councillors. Okay. Now this body, that is the legislative councillors, were called Indian Legislative Council. Okay, these are the Governor General's Legislative Council, right? So these were called Indian Legislative Council, and this functioned as a mini parliament, same like British Parliament. They used to legislate, they used to do all the special functions of the government by requiring special machinery and special processes in this legislative council. It is same like a mini parliament. Okay. Now next, it introduced an open competition system for selection of recruitment of civil servants. See, before in 1833, it thought to open for the it thought to do open competition systems for selection of civil servants, but court of directors rejected. And again here it introduced open competition system for selection and recruitment of civil servants. The convenient civil service was thus thrown open to Indians also. Now for Indians also it was open. Accordingly, Macaulay Committee, the Committee on the Indian Civil Service, was appointed in 1854. Okay, Macaulay Committee is the Committee on the Indian Civil Service, was appointed in 1854. Finally, it was, open competition system for selection of civil servants was done in Charter Act 1833, and Macaulay Committee was appointed in 1854 for selection of civil servants. Now next is, it extended the company's rule and allowed it to retain the possessions of Indian territories on trust for the British Crown. But it did not specify any particular period, unlike the previous charters. This was a clear indication that the company's rule could be terminated at any time the Parliament liked. So before, in Charter Act 1833, it ended the activities of East India Company. But here in Charter Act 1853, it asked the company to rule and allowed allowed to retain some possessions in Indian territory, but it did not specify any particular time till when it should be ruling. Okay, so that means if the British government likes, it can terminate at any time. Now next, it introduced for the first time local representation in the Indian Legislative Council. Of the 6 new legislative members of the Governor General's Council, 4 members were appointed by the local governments of Madras, Bombay, Bengal and Agra. Okay, local representation started in 1853, Charter Act. Okay, so from the 6 legislative members, 4 were local, that is provincial members, who are appointed from Madras, Bombay, Bengal and Agra. And next, okay, local representation started here. Now the Crown Rule 1858 to 1947, Government of India Act of 1858. So this significant act was enacted in the wake of the revolt of 1857, also known as the First War of Independence or the Sepoy Mutiny. The act, also as the act known as the Act for the Good Government of India, abolished the East India Company and transferred the powers of government, territories and revenues to the British Crown. Now, the features of this act were as follows. It provided that India henceforth was to be governed by and in the name of Her Majesty. It changed the designation of Governor General of India to that of Viceroy of India. That means before 1857 revolt, India was ruled by the Governor General of India. But after this 1857 revolt, it transferred the powers to the Queen of British. Okay, so the representative of British Queen is Viceroy, So he, Viceroy, was a direct representative of the British Crown in India. Lord Cannon thus became the first Viceroy of India. Now the first Governor General of Bengal is Lord Warren Hastings. First Governor General of India is Lord William Bentinck, and first Viceroy of India is Lord Canning. Is that clear, guys? Now second point is it ended the system of double government by abolishing the Board of Control and Court of Directors. I have said you in which act double government system was introduced. It is in the it's in Pitt's India Act. And now finally in the Government of India Act of 1858, the double government system was ended. That is, it was abolished. That means Board of Control and Board of Directors were also completely abolished. Now, in which act Board of Control was introduced? It is introduced in Pitt's India Act to control the political affairs. In which act does the Court of Directors was introduced? It is in Regulating Act of 1773 to report on its revenue, civil and military affairs. Later on, in Pitt's India Act, it took up the duties to control the commercial affairs of the East India Company. Okay, so now third is it created a new office, Secretary of State for India, vested with complete authority and control over Indian administration. Secretary of State was also created. The Secretary of State was a member of the British Cabinet and was responsible ultimately to the British Parliament. It established a 15-member Council of India to assist the Secretary of State for India. The council was an advisory body. The Secretary of State was made the chairman of the council. So 15-member council was established, and the chairman of that council was the Secretary of State. So what does they do? They advise the Viceroy. Okay, now next, it constituted the Secretary of State in Council as a body corporate capable of suing and being sued in India and in England. So the Act of 1858 was, however, largely confined to the improvement of administrative machinery by which Indian government was to be supervised and controlled in England. It did not alter any substantial way the system of government that prevailed in India. So the Act of 1857 just changed and improved administrative machinery. It has kept the Viceroy. It has took away the Governor General of India and introduced Viceroy of India. But what about the people of India? There was no improvement or any change in the lives of the people. So this is about this Government of India Act 1858. The next act is Indian Councils Act of 1861. So after the Great Revolt of 1857, the British government felt the necessity of seeking the cooperation of the Indians in the administration of the country. In pursuance of this policy of association, 3 acts were enacted by the British Parliament in 1861, 1892, 1909. So the Indian Councils Act of 1861 is an important landmark in constitutional and political history of India. Features of this act were as follows. First, it made a beginning of a representative institutions by associating Indians with the lawmaking process. Now, it thus provided that the Viceroy should nominate some Indians as non-official members of his expanded council. So the council, which consists of 6 members, has been expanded, and that expanded council consists of non-official members. So in 1862, Lord Cannon, the then Viceroy, nominated 3 Indians to his legislative council: the Raja of Benares, the Maharaja of Patiala, and Sir Dinkar Rao. Okay, now why did Lord Cannon involved in nominations? Because here see here in 1793 he made two demands. One is he should give power to override the decision of the council in special cases, and next he would also be the commander in chief. Okay, for these two demands, even here he recommended he recommended the expanded council of members who are non-official members, not this one. Okay, this. So here Lord Cannon was involved, and next even his period is continuing as a viceroy in this. So I want you to make sure about that 1786 act. So that's the reason I have remembered you. Now next, the three non-official Indian members are Raja of Benares, Maharaja of Patiala, and Sir Dinkar Rao. Next, it initiated the process of decentralization by restoring the legislative powers to Bombay and Madras presidencies. Now guys, in which act it deprived, the governor of India has deprived the powers of Bombay and Madras presidency governors? It is in Charter Act 1833. Okay, so and again here in this Charter Indian Council Act 1861, they got back their legislative powers. So again slowly decentralization started. It thus reversed the centralizing tendency that started from Regulating Act of 1773 and reached its climax under Charter Act of 1833. Thus, the legislative devolution resulted in the grant of almost complete internal autonomy of the provinces in 1937. Now, let's again see the Charter Act of 1833. Here, see here, it deprived the governor of Bombay and Madras of their legislative powers. When in Charter Act 1833, it happened, and now in Indian Council Act 1861, the governor of Bombay and Madras got their legislative powers back. So slowly decentralization started. Now next, it provided for the establishment of new legislative councils for Bengal, Northwestern Province and Punjab, which were established in 1862, 1886 and 1897. That is, new legislative of Council of Bengal in 1862, Northwestern Province in 1886 and Punjab in 1897. So it empowered the viceroy to make rules and orders for the more convenient transaction of business in the council. It also gave a recognition to the portfolio system introduced by Lord Canning in 1859. Under this, a member of Viceroy's Council was made in charge of one or more departments of the government and was authorized to issue final orders on behalf of the council on matters of his department. So here, portfolio system was introduced by Lord Cannon in 1859, and it was implemented in this act. Now it empowered the viceroy to issue ordinances without the concurrence of legislative council during emergency. So viceroy can issue emergency statement without the concurrence of legislative councils. Okay. So next, so the life of such ordinance was 6 months. So viceroy can issue without consulting legislative councils the emergency ordinance, and that that, and the lifetime of such ordinance is 6 months. And next is Indian Council Act of 1892. The features of this act were as follows. It increased the number of additional, that is non-official members in the central and provincial legislative councils, but maintained the official majority in them. See, here in Indian Council Act 1861, 3 members were added, that is Raja of Benares, Maharaja of Patiala and Sir Dinkar Rao. Whereas here in Indian Council Act of 1892, the additional non-official members in provincial and central legislative councils increased, but official majority is maintained with that is British remained as official majority. And next, it increased the functions of the Legislative Council and gave them the power of discussing the budget and addressing questions to the executive. So they got the power of discussing the budget. And the third point is, it provided for the nomination of some non-official members of the Central Legislative Council by the Viceroy on recommendation of the Provincial Legislative Councils and the Bengal Chamber of Commerce, and also that of the provincial legislative councils by the governors on the recommendation of the district boards, municipalities, universities, trade associations, zamindars and chambers. Is it clear, guys? So even it extended the the nominations were done for some non-official members. First is the Central Legislative Council by Viceroy on the recommendation of provincial legislative councils and Bengal Chamber of Commerce. And for provincial legislative councils, the recommendations were given to the governor. And who gave the recommendations? It is the district boards, municipalities, universities, trade associations, zamindars and chambers. Is it clear, guys? I'll repeat it once again. See, the non-official members were included more in central and provincial levels. So, for Central Legislative Council, recommendations were given by Provincial Legislative Council and Bengal Chamber of Commerce. Okay, these recommendations were given to Viceroy. So, Viceroy on those recommendations appointed them as non-official members. Whereas coming to provincial legislative councils, so the district boards, municipalities, universities, trade associations, zamindars and chambers gave their recommendations to the governor. So the governor nominated them as the province legislative councils. Now this act made a limited and indirect provisions for the use of election in filling up some of the non-official seats both in the central and provincial legislative councils. So they filled up both non-official members in central and provincial legislative councils, and the word election here was however not used in this act. The process was described as nomination made by the recommendations of certain bodies. Even the nomination process has taken place, election was not used here. Now the next is Indian Council Act of 1909. This act is also known as Morley-Minto reforms. The Lord Morley was a secretary and Minto was a viceroy of India. So the features of this act were as follows. First, it considerably increased the size of the legislative councils, both central and provincial. The number of members in the Central Legislative Council was raised from 16 to 60. And the number of members in Provincial Legislative Council was not uniform. Okay, so in Central Legislative Council, the non-official members were raised from 16 to 60. Not non-official. The size of the Legislative Council was raised from 16 to 60, whereas in provincial levels it was not uniform. So next, it retained official majority in the Central Legislative Council but allowed provincial legislative councils to have non-official majority. So here official majority, that the Britishers remained as a majority in the Central Legislative Council, but in Provincial Legislative Council, the non-official members, that is the Indians, remained as the majority in the Provincial Legislative Councils. Now, the third point is it enlarged the deliberative functions of the legislative councils at both the levels. For example, members were allowed to ask supplementary questions, move resolutions on the budget, and so on. So they also got budget discussion rights, right? So they were also involved in budget. So it provided for the first time for the association of Indians with the executive councils of the viceroy and governors. So both of them have different executive councils, right? So even for that executive councils, Indians were permitted. So Satyendra Prasad Sinha became the first Indian to join the Viceroy's Executive Council. He was appointed as a law member. And next, it introduced communal representation for Muslims. This is very famous question. So they will ask, in which act communal representation was introduced, specially giving separate electorates for Muslims? So you have to write Morley-Minto Reforms Act. Is that clear, guys? So it introduced a system of communal representation for Muslims by accepting the concept of separate electorate. So under this, the Muslim members were to be elected only by the Muslim voters. Thus, the act legalized communalism, and Lord Minto, who is Lord Minto, the viceroy, came to be known as the father of communal electorate. Okay. In Morley-Minto reforms, separate electorates for Muslims was implemented, and Minto was known as father of communal electorate. Now next, it also provided for the separate representation of presidency corporations, chambers of commerce, universities, and zamindars. So separate representation was also done for all these sectors, that is presidency corporations, chambers of commerce, universities, and zamindars. Now next, Government of India Act 1919. So on August 20, 1917, the British government declared for the first time that its objective was the gradual introduction of responsible government in India. So the Government of India of 1919 was thus enacted, which came into force in 1921. So Government of India was enacted in 1919 and came into force in 1921. This act is also known as Montague-Chelmsford Reforms. Okay, so here, when did Morley-Minto reforms came? It came in 1909. And whereas Montague-Chelmsford reforms came at 1919 and it was came into force in 1921, enacted in 1919. Is it clear, guys? In Montague was the secretary and Chelmsford was the viceroy. So the features of this act were as follows. It relaxed the central control over the provinces by demarcating and separating the central and provincial subjects. The central and provincial legislatures were authorized to make laws on their respective list of subjects. However, the structure of government continued to be centralized and unitary. Second, it further divided the provincial subjects into two parts, that is transferred and reserved. The transferred subjects were to be administered by the governor with the aid of ministers responsible to the legislative council. The reserved subjects, on the other hand, were to be administered by the governor and his executive council without being responsible to the legislative council. See here, the difference between transferred and reserved is, in transferred subjects, the governor has to administer with aid of ministers and he is responsible to legislative council. Whereas in reserved, the governor and his executive council can administer without being responsible to legislative council. Is it clear, guys? In transferred, he will be responsible. In reserved subjects, he will not be responsible to legislative councils. Only that is only difference. This dual scheme of governance was known as diarchy. Now, what is double government? Double government means court of directors and board of controls both controlled India that time. So, in Pitt's India Act, double government system was introduced, and whereas in Montague-Kempsford reforms, diarchy was introduced. So, the term derived from the Greek word diarchy, which means the double rule. However, this experiment was largely unsuccessful. Double rule means transferred and reserved subjects were introduced here. So these were unsuccessful. So the third point is, it introduced for the first time bicameralism and direct elections in the country. Thus, the Indian Legislative Council was replaced by the bicameral legislature consisting of an upper house, that is Council of States, and lower house consisting of Legislative Assembly. So what is bicameralism? Bicameralism means having upper house and lower house. Now also in India is a bicameral country. Why? Because we have upper house and lower house. That is, we have Rajya Sabha and Lok Sabha. So the same here. It introduced for the first time bicameralism and direct elections in the country. Thus, Indian Legislative Council was replaced by a bicameral legislature consisting of an upper house, that is Council of States, and lower house, that is Legislative Assembly. The majority of members of both the houses were chosen by direct elections. And fourth is, it required that the 3 of the 6 members of Viceroy's Executive Council, that is, other than the Commander-in-Chief, were to be Indian. Is it clear, guys? It required that the 3 of the 6 members of Viceroy's Executive Council were to be Indian. And who is the first Viceroy's Executive Council member Indian? He is Satyendra Prasad Sinha. Okay. And he became as the first executive council from India to join this Viceroy's Executive Council. He was appointed as law member. So next is, so here out of 6, 3 members were from Indians. And the fifth one is, it extended the principle of communal representation by providing separate electorates for Muslims, Indian Christians, Anglo-Indians and Europeans. So in 1909, separate electorate for Muslims were given, and here in Montague-Kempsford reforms 1919, separate electorates were also given for Sikhs, Indian Christians, Anglo-Indians and Europeans. And next, it granted franchise to the limited number of people on the basis of property, tax or education. Now next, it created a new office of the High Commissioner for India in London and transferred to him some of the functions hitherto performed by the Secretary of State for India. Now next, it provided for the establishment of the Public Service Commission. Hence, the Central Public Service Commission was set up in 1926 for recruiting civil servants. So it separated for the first time provincial budgets from the central budgets and authorized the provincial legislatures to enact their budgets. So here it provided for the appointment of the statutory commissions to inquire into and report on its working after 10 years for its coming into force. So this statutory commission after 10 years came to be known as Simon's Commission. So this commission was formed to report on its working. Okay, so this act was passed in 1919. So in 1929, one commission should be set up. So before only in 1927, 2 years before the schedule, Simon Commission was set up. Okay, so the British government announced the appointment of 7-member statutory commission under the chairmanship of John Simon to report on the condition of India under its new council. So all the members of the commission were British, and hence all the parties boycotted the commission. So you'll get a question, why many of Indians boycotted this commission? Because all of them are from British. All of them in the commission are the Britishers. So Indians did not accept this Simon Commission report. So the commission submitted its report in 1930 and recommended the abolition of diarchy. Diarchy means double rule. Double rule means the governor having transferred and reserved subjects. So in transferred, he can administer with the advice of these councils, and he should be responsible to legislative council, whereas in reserved he can administer without being responsible. Okay, that is diarchy. So this report recommended to abolish the diarchy, extension extension of responsible government in the provinces, establishment of Federation of British India and Princely States. Federalism means mutual cooperation between British India and Princely States. So continuation of communal electorates and so on. So to consider the proposals of the commission, the British government convened 3 roundtable conferences of the representatives of the British government, British India and the British Princely States. So on the basis of these discussions, a white paper on constitutional reforms was prepared and submitted for the consideration of Joint Select Committee of the British Parliament. The recommendations of this committee were incorporated in the next Government of India Act 1935. So here, Simon Commission gave report. In that report, he said that abolition of diarchy should be done, and responsible government should also be expanded to provinces also, and a federation should be established between British India and Princely States. Federation means mutual cooperation. So communal electorates should be continued. So to consider all these proposals, British government thought to establish 3 roundtable conferences where that should be attended by British government, British India and Indian Princely States. So upon this, white paper on constitutional reforms will be discussed in these roundtable conferences. So this, whatever they discussed in that roundtable conferences, that will be incorporated in Government of India Act 1935. So in 1930 first roundtable conference was started, in 1931 second, and in 1932 third. The only roundtable conference which was attended by Gandhi was in 1931 after the Gandhi-Irwin Pact. So all the 3 roundtable conferences was attended by only Dr. B.R. Ambedkar. Okay, now next, communal award. In August 1932, Ramsay MacDonald, the British Prime Minister, announced a scheme of representation of minorities which came to be known as the Communal Award. So what is Communal Award? It is the scheme for representation of minorities. So the award not only continued separate electorates for Muslims, Sikhs, Indian Christians, Anglo-Indians and Europeans, but also extended it to the depressed classes, that is scheduled castes. Gandhiji was distressed over this extension of the principle of communal representation to the depressed classes and undertook fast unto death in Yerawada Jail, Pune, to get the award modified. So at last there was agreement between the leaders of the Congress and the depressed classes. So the agreement known as Pune Pact retained the Hindu joint electorate and gave reserved seats to the depressed classes. So, communal award was announced by Ramsay MacDonald, but it was rejected by Mahatma Gandhi and he took fast unto death in Yaravada jail. So, the depressed classes and the Congress was came to an agreement, and an agreement was signed between Gandhi and Dr. B.R. Ambedkar, and that agreement which was signed came to be known as Pune Pact. So after this, the depressed classes got reserved seats. Next act is Government of India Act of 1935. The act marked a second milestone towards a completely responsible government in India. It was a lengthy and detailed document having 321 sections and 10 schedules. So, many of the features of the Government of India Act 1935 were implemented in the Indian Constitution. So, now let's get into the features of this act. First, it provided for the establishment of the All India Federation consisting of provinces, princely states as units. The act divided the powers between the center and units in terms of three lists, that is, federal list, provincial list, and concurrent list. These list of subjects were also added in 7th schedule in our Indian Constitution. So the residuary powers were given to the Viceroy. However, the federation never came into being as the princely states did not join it. Next, it abolished diarchy in the provisions and introduced provincial autonomy in its place. The provinces were allowed to act as autonomous units and of administration in their defined spheres. Moreover, the Act introduced responsible governments in provinces, that is, the governor was required to act with the advice of ministers responsible to the provincial legislature. This came into effect in 1937 and was discontinued in 1939. So, third point is it provided for the adoption of diarchy at the center. Consequently, the federal subjects were divided into reserved subjects and transferred subjects. However, this provision of the Act did not come into operation at all. Fourth point, it introduced bicameralism in 6 out of 11 provinces. Thus, the legislatures of Bengal, Bombay, Madras, Bihar, Assam, and United Provinces were made bicameral, consisting of a legislative council, that is upper house, and a legislative assembly, that is lower house. So 6 out of 11 provinces were bicameral legislatures. That means they have both upper house and lower house. However, many restrictions were placed on them. Fifth is, it further extended the principle of communal representation by providing separate electorates for depressed classes. Okay, in Minto-Morley reforms, separate electorate for Muslims were added. In Montague-Chelmsford reforms, for Christians, Sikhs, Anglo-Indians, for all them also communal separate electorates were held. And now in this Government of India Act 1935, separate electorates for depressed classes, that is scheduled castes, and also women and labours were held. And next, it abolished the Council of India, established by the Government of India Act of 1858. So, Council of India was abolished. The Secretary of State for India was provided with a team of advisors. Okay, now 7th point is it extended franchise. About 10% of the total population got voting rights. See, it extended franchise. That means 10% of total population got voting right. And next, it provided for the establishment of the Reserve Bank of India to control the currency and credit of the country. That means Reserve Bank of India was established under Government of India Act 1935. So ninth is it provided for the establishment of not only a federal public service commission but also a provincial public service commission and joint public service commission for two or more provinces. Okay, now next it provided for the establishment of federal court, which was set up in 1937, and Supreme Court was established at 1774 at Calcutta with one chief justice and three other judges under regulating act. Now here federal court was established in 1937. And now the Indian Independence Act of 1947. On February 20, 1947, the British Prime Minister Clement Attlee declared that the British rule in India would end by June 30, 1948. So after which the power would be transferred to the responsible Indian heads. This announcement was followed by the agitation of Muslim League demanding partition of the country. Again on June 3, 1947, the British government made it clear that any constitution framed by the Constituent Assembly of India formed in 1946 cannot apply to those parts of the country which were unwilling to accept it. Okay, those regions or provinces which don't want to join India will not join India. So on the same day, that is on June 3, 1947, Lord Mountbatten, the Viceroy of India, put forth the partition plan, also known as Mountbatten Plan. The plan was accepted by the Congress and the Muslim League. The immediate effect was given to the plan by enacting the Indian Independence Act 1947. So let's get into the features. First, it ended the British rule in India and declared India as an independent sovereign state from August 15, 1947. Next, it provided for the partition of India and creation of two independent dominions of India and Pakistan with the right to secede from the British Commonwealth. So third, it abolished the office of Viceroy and provided for each dominion a Governor General who was to be appointed by the British King on the advice of the Dominion Cabinet. His Majesty's government in British was to have no responsibility with respect to the government of India or Pakistan. So next, it empowered the constituent assemblies of the two dominions to frame and adopt any constitution of their respective nations and to repeal any act of the British Parliament, including the Independence Act itself. Fifth, it empowered the constituent assemblies of both the dominions to legislate for their respective territories till the new constitutions were drafted and enforced. Next, no act of the British Parliament passed after August 15, 1947 was to extend to either of the new dominions unless it was extended thereto by the law of legislature of the dominion. So, no law will be enacted after the passage of August 15, 1947. Okay, so after that, no law which was passed by British government will come into force or will have no value. So next, sixth point is it abolished the office of Secretary of State for India and transferred his functions to the Secretary of State for Commonwealth Affairs. So seventh, it proclaimed the lapse of British paramountcy over the Indian princely states and treaty relations with tribal areas from August 15, 1947. See guys, this point is one of the major one of the major step taken by the British because of this lapse of the treaty relations and tribal areas. There were many internal and as well as external disputes between India and other countries and other states also. See, even Assam has disputes, Nepal has disputes. All these regions which border countries has disputes, and one of the reason for that disputes is this point. It proclaimed the lapse of British paramountcy over the Indian princely states and treaty relations with tribal areas from August 15, 1947. Next, it granted freedom to the Indian princely states either to join the Dominion of India or Dominion of Pakistan or to remain independent. So, ninth, it provided for the governance of each of the dominions of the provinces by the Government of India Act 1935 till the new constitutions were framed. The dominions were, however, authorized to make modifications in the Act. 10th point, it deprived the British monarch of his right to veto bills or ask for reservations of certain bills for his approval. So before, the British monarch can use his veto bills or to ask reservation for certain bills. So now these are also deprived, but this was reserved to Governor General. So the Governor General would have full power to assent to any bill in the name of His Majesty. 11th point, it designated the Governor General of India and the provincial governors as the constitutional, that is, nominal heads of the states. They were made to act on the advice of the respective Council of Ministers in all matters. 12th, it dropped the title of Emperor of India from the royal titles of the King of England. 13th point, it discontinued the appointment of civil services and reservations of post by the Secretary of State for India. The members of the civil service appointed before August 15, 1947 would continue to enjoy all benefits that they were entitled to till that time. So at the stroke of midnight, 14 to 15 August 1947, the British rule came to an end and power was transferred to the new independent dominions of India and Pakistan. Lord Mountbatten became first Governor General of the new Dominion of India. He swore in Jawaharlal Nehru as the first Prime Minister of independent India. The Constituent Assembly of India, formed in 1946, became the Parliament of the Indian Dominion. So now the interim governments are, portfolio system was introduced by Lord Cannon. So here the members of interim government are Jawaharlal Nehru as Vice President of Council, External Affairs and Commonwealth Relations, Sardar Vallabhbhai Patel as Home, Information and Broadcasting Minister, and Dr. Rajendra Prasad was the Food and Agriculture Minister, Dr. John Mithai, Industries and Supplies Minister, Jagjeevan Ram, Labour Minister, Sardar Baldev Singh, Defence Minister, C.H. Baba, Works, Mines and Power Minister, Liaquat Ali Khan, Finance Minister, Abdul Rab Nishtar, Posts and Air Minister, Asaf Ali, Railways and Transport Minister, C. Rajagopalachari, Education and Arts Minister, I. Chundrigar, Commerce Minister, Ghaznafar Ali Khan, Health Minister, Joginder Nath Mandal, Law Minister. So the members of the interim government were the members of Viceroy's Executive Council. The Viceroy continued to be the head of the council, but Jawaharlal Nehru was designated as the Vice President of the council. So here the first cabinet of Free India 1947 was, the members are Jawaharlal Nehru as a Prime Minister, External Affairs and Commonwealth Relations, Science Relations, Scientific Research Minister, and Sardar Vallabhbhai Patel as Home, Information and Broadcasting States Minister, Dr. Rajendra Prasad as Food and Agriculture Minister, Maulana Abul Kalam Azad was Education Minister, John Mithai was Railway and Transport Minister, R.K. Shanmugam Chatty was Finance Minister, Dr. B.R. Ambedkar was Law Minister, Jagjeevan Ram as Labour Minister, Sardar Baldev Singh as Defence Minister, Rajkumari Amrit Kaur was Health Minister, C.H. Baba was Commerce Minister, Rafi Ahmad Kidwai was Communication Minister, Dr. Shyama Prasad Mukherjee was Industries and Supplies Minister, V.N. Gadgil was the Works, Mines and Power Minister.